Today I'm going to be making Aztec hot chocolate, or xocolatl, I believe that's how it's pronounced. Before we get started, first things, the utensils you're going to need. You're going to need a pan, you're going to need a spoon, a measuring cup, so I have a cup right here, and I have teaspoons, and then you're going to need a knife to cut the jalapeno pepper. And then for the ingredients, in this Aztec hot chocolate, we are just going to be using whole milk. We're going to be using dark chocolate, habanero peppers, not this many, but we'll measure out how many we need, cinnamon sugar, or just ground cinnamon, a bit of nutmeg, and a bit of vanilla extract. Now the ingredients calls for half a cup of chopped dark chocolate, 2 cups of milk, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, a dash of salt, 1 chili pepper, and 1 to 4 tablespoons of coconut sugar. Now I'm going to be making the more traditional, so we have sugar in the ingredients if we need, but I'm going to try not to use sugar because I want a more bitter taste, because the actual axolotl was pretty bitter tasting. And we also are going to be adding nutmeg to the mix, because I've seen nutmeg in other recipes, and I also just like the taste of nutmeg when it comes into spicy hot chocolate. It adds such a nice flavor profile. So those are the utensils that we're going to be using. This recipe, I'm just going to be using 5 chili peppers, or 5 habanero peppers. I know the recipe calls for 1 chili pepper, but I really like it to be very spicy, and also chili peppers are much larger than these. So we're just going to be using 5 of these. Alright, once the peppers are cut open, I'm just going to set these aside. I cut out all the seeds because we're just going to put these in at the end just to let the heat simmer until it click. Also, one thing to mention is I went for 85% cocoa, which is a really high cocoa content, which means there's not a lot of sugar in this. So overall, the taste is going to be more bitter, which is more accurate to what xocolatl of ancient times would have been like. Xocolatl of ancient times was a more bitter chocolatey drink rather than a very sweet drink with a lot of sugar in it, which is why I'm probably going to not be using too much sugar in it and focus on the spice from the peppers and just the general spices to give it flavor. So the recipe calls for half a cup of chocolate, and we are just going to pour that in there, and we are going to let that melt with a bit of milk to start. So the recipe calls for 2 cups of milk. So we're going to start out by pouring about half a cup of milk in. And we want the milk to melt with the chocolate, and then we'll just add the remaining milk in a bit. Just like that, and we're going to stir that around and let it melt a bit. So now that the chocolate is pretty melted in, I'm going to add the remaining 1.5 cups of milk. And then we're going to keep whisking for a little bit, and then we're going to start adding the spices. All right, here's our 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. Here's our 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and that cinnamon was 1 teaspoon, not tablespoon. And then we're going to give this a stir. And then after stirring for a bit, we will start to add in the nutmeg. Is not in the list of ingredients, so I'm just going to estimate it, or I'm just going to say half a teaspoon will work. And then we're going to add the chili peppers until it gets to almost a boil, and then we will remove them. So I was going to use 6 peppers, but I'm only going to use 3 because I did not realize how spicy habaneros were. So I'm just going to only add 3, and then in the end result, I will let you know if I change it. But then we're just going to have these in and let this simmer until it gets to almost near boil. And then we will remove them and let it cool down. All right, so it is starting to boil, so I'm going to take it off the heat. So I've removed the pot from the heat, and we're gonna let this sit for about 10 minutes. And when you pour these into the mugs, make sure you take the chili peppers out. And I added just a bit of sugar and a bit more vanilla just to give it a bit of sweetness, because it was lacking a little bit of that. It's still very bitter and very spicy. It's an amazing drink, and I highly recommend that you try it out at home. It really elevates the hot chocolate to the next game. So thank you for watching.